Greetings, fellow programmers. My name is Pavel. I'm here with a Visual Basic exercise from the book Introduction to Programming Using Visual Basic, and this is a Chapter 9 exercise, or Project 5. And it says, I'm going to display what we are going to build right after I read the instructions. It says, what is the probability that the underdog will win the World Series in baseball? What is the average number of games for a World Series? Write an animated program that answers these questions. For instance, suppose that the underdog is expected to win 40% of the time. We say that the probability of the underdogs winning a game is 40%. Obviously, in order for a team to be the underdog, the probability of winning must be less than 50%. Otherwise, it would be the favorite. For example, the probability of 40% underdogs winning the World Series is about 29%, and such series would last an average of 5.7 games. So this is the statistics they give it us. Our program will kind of see if we come close to it. This is all gonna be random, so it's all probability, so the results will be different for each time you run the program, but they should be somewhat close, I guess. Now the program should simulate the playing of 10,000 World Series, where the underdog has the probability of winning that was entered into the first text box. The values of the horizontal scroll bars should extend from 0 to 10,000 and should be calculated after each series, so that the scroll boxes steadily move across the bars. That's the animation portion. We will click the button, we will do the calculations, and the scroll bars will be moving on their own, like up and, well, not up and down, just up, based on the calculations of the wins for the World Series. Note, they just want us to know that in order to spare Visual Basic from being overwhelmed with changing the values in the 12 text boxes, remember we're gonna be looping 10,000 times, so that's some power that the computer needs. They just want us to change the values after each 10 series. So we will calculate 10 series and then the scroll bar will move. So not after each and single one of them. Also, every time the values are changed, execute a refresh method for each of these text boxes. So, for those who don't know, World Series in baseball, let's say there's two teams, and one team has to win 4 games to be the champion. So the best case scenario is that the team wins 4 games and the other team wins 0, so 4-0. So the minimum number of games needed to play is 4. The maximum number of games to play, obviously, is 7, because if the team wins 4, then the other team could win up to 3 games. Alright, so 4-3 would be the score. So we have from 4, so we have 4, 5, 6, or 7 games possible. Now this is the form, but let me just run it so you can see it better. The colors, I just made it this way for more like for the contrast of the video. Whatever you make your background and all that stuff doesn't really matter. So here's the probability that we will enter for the underdog. So let's say that was 40%. And we have all these scroll bars here and text boxes, and it says underdog. So this one will move whenever the underdog wins, or every 10 games the underdog wins. And this is for the favorite team. These indicate how many 4 games, 5 games, 6 games, or 7 games are needed. And in our text boxes, it will basically say how many 4 games were needed, and it calculates the percentage of all the games. In other words, what's the percentage of 4 games World Series, what's the percentage of 5 game World Series, and so forth. And over here we have a text box that will simply display how many games on average the World Series lasted. So it's gonna be some decimal number like 5.6 or 7 or something like that, typically with 40%. So when I click the button now, You can see everything's moving on its own. The numbers are refreshing, and you can see the percentages, you can see the wins, and here's the end of it. And it says, okay, the underdog would win if we play 10,000 World Series matches, not games. Remember, one World Series needs a minimum of 4 games. So the underdog with 40% chance of winning would win about 2,237 games, and favorite would win the rest of it. So here's the percentages. So the favorite would win about 77%. In this scenario, obviously, if I click it again, it would be a different numbers. And here it says how many 4 games were played, 1,583, which is, since there's 10,000 games, obviously that's 15,083%. I mean 15.83%. The same for 5 games, 6 games, and 7 games World Series. So there would be 2,598 games that would end in a score. The World Series would end in 4-3 for the favorite, or for the underdog. In this case, it's not really clear. It just simply says there's 25% chance that there would be 7 games series. And over here it simply says the final 5.66 games is the average duration of the World Series. Alright, so this is what we're building, and okay, let's get started, I guess. Okay, so let me show you the how the form is being constructed. These are just horizontal scroll boxes. When I click it over here, the things to keep in mind is the large change is 1 and maximum is 10,000, since we are playing 10,000 games, and I want to kind of move it in 1. They want us to move it in every time a 10 game, and in 10 World Series are played, not 10 games. Remember that. It's always might be a little confusing, but again, one World Series can consist from 4 to 7 games. So anyway, so the large change is 1, maximum is 10,000, and I simply name them, this one is HSB for horizontal scroll bar, underdog. This one would be HSB favorite. This one would be HSB games 4, because that's like how many games are needed. In this case, it shows how many 4 games World Series there would be. This is 5, 6, and so forth. A bunch of text boxes. Text box underdog value. It will display how many games the underdog would win, and actual how many games. And over here it would say the text underdog percent. What's the percentage of that? And this is our input. This is basically the probability that we will give the underdog, from which we will calculate. And the only button that we have is this one, simply called button simulate. And when we click it, that's where we would, start our coding, obviously. So the first thing I'm gonna do, I'm gonna create a constant called games as integer, and this will hold the number of games that we wanna simulate, which is gonna be the 10,000. Again, these are the actual World Series games, not just the single games. So 10,000 World Series, but I'll just call it games. Okay, for now I'll call it games anyway. Alright, in the load, what do we need? Well, we need to, we could put the values here, just when the form loads. So we start from 0 and 0. This is more just a for like a display. So text box, the underdog value dot text equals 0, and also the favorite one too. So text box favorite value dot text equals 0. That's really all. We don't call anything else from the load. We really don't even need this. It's just to kind of initialize the values. Now, as far as the button click goes, I'm going to have it call 2 functions. One that will update the text. Remember, it says every time the values are changed, execute a refresh method for each of the text boxes. So I'm gonna create a method called refresh text. So let's do that. It could be private because it's going to be only called from our button click. So it's gonna be a sub and call it refresh text, I guess. And what we do, we'll simply refresh everything. So we will do text box underdog value dot refresh. What does it say when it's refresh? What's my IntelliSense saying? It says forces the control to invalidate its client area and immediately redraw itself and any child controls. This basically makes the animations. It will make the scroll bars to move. It will make the text boxes to update their value, the numbers in them, as the scroll bars are moving. So the same for all of the others. So it's gonna be very value that refresh, and I just paused the video and entered all the other text boxes that I have on the form for the 4 games, 5 games, 7 games, the percentages. So basically all of these controls have the refresh method being called. Alright, so that's our refresh method. Now we need something that would actually kind of play the game. Like when we click the button, it will execute the logic for playing the game, or simulation. It's not really a game, but to me it is a game, because we kind of simulate the actual game, the game of baseball. All right, so I'll just call it play game, and this is where we will do most of the calculations. So we will need a random number, because obviously we will be generating the probability. So I'm gonna create dim probability as integer, and the probability is being entered here in our text box. All right, that's what we assume that the probability of winning for the underdog is. So we will do, since it's a text box, we will need to convert it to integer and pass the text from the probability dot text. So whatever the user enters there will be passed to our probability integer variable. Next one, I'll create a random as new random. That's gonna be a random generator, and I'm gonna do a game over as boolean. This will simply determine whether the game is over, or the series over, you know, based on whether one team won 4 times or not. So it's gonna be as integer, as boolean, which I already have, and I'll initialize it to false at the beginning, because at the beginning the game is not over. I will do underdog wins as integer, initialize it to 0, and of course the next one would be the favorite wins as integer. This will hold the number of wins within the series for each, and then once one of them reaches 4, the series is over. And dim total games basically will say how many games for that series were needed. Okay, so let's do the basic loop, which is gonna be a while loop. While the game over is false, we will loop and play the games. So we will generate random number from 0% to 100%. Now remember, we generated from 0 to 100, However, the probability for the underdog, if he is entered into the text box, so it could be only 40, for example. In the example that they gave us, it was 40. So we have to do an if statement. If the rand.next and generate it from 0 to 100, then so if this is less than the probability, which would be, let's say, those 40%. So if the random number generated is up to 40, then the underdog wins. However, if the number generated is from 41 to 100, then the favorite team wins. So if this is true, like I said, the underdog wins. Let's just do the underdog wins. We will increase it by 1, or how many games the underdog wins. Else, if this is if the number is like I said, from 41 to 60, that's assuming that the input is 40. All right, I mean the input could be anything, but if it's if it's greater than the probability, then the favorite team wins. So the favorite wins plus equals 1. We will add one game to the favorite team. Now, still within the while loop, we check if anyone won 4 games, because that's when the series ends, right? If one team wins 4 games. So if underdog wins equals 4, then game is over, right? Game over equals true, and that will exit the while loop. And now, if this is over, we can increase the series, the World Series, by 1. So we can move our horizontal scroll bars by 1. So for the underdog team. So this would be this scroll bar. I mean, sorry, the underdog scroll bar, because the underdog wins this one series. So the HSB, that's how I call these scroll bars, underdog, we will increase it by 1. Now, else if the favorite wins, what is this? Else if the favorite teams, favorite wins equals 4. In other words, if the favorite team won 4 games, then the game is still over, but this time obviously we will increase the HSB favorite we are increasing, I forgot over here what we are doing. We are increasing the value of the scroll bar by 1. So over here too, a value by plus equals 1. There is no else. If it's else, then none of the teams won 4 games yet, so we go back to our while loop and play another game until the World Series is over. In other words, until one of the teams won 4 games. But we will increase our total count for the games plus equals 1. We will add the game to total games played. Or here I'll just type series is over if one team wins 4 games. Okay, so now this loop will take care of calculating, the number of games needed to play for the one series and who won. So now we can go after the while loop and do an update the game sliders based on how many games were needed for any team to win. What I mean by that is simply do a select statement, select case, total games, And we'll start from the lowest. If case 4, in other words, if there were 4 games needed only, then the HSB games 4, obviously, value is increased by 1. If that's case 5, if 5 games were needed, then we will increase the scroll bar value on the HSB game 5. And case 6 games, that's gonna be the HSB games 6, that value. And finally case 7, that's the most number of games that can World Series can have, HSB games 7, that value, plus equals 1. Okay, so this is our game loop that basically calculates how many games are needed and takes care of the horizontal scroll bars and calculates the totals as well. So now what we need to do, we need to update the actual text. We need to update our text boxes over here to the values that are being now assigned to our scroll bars, because they have to match the number. This simply shows the number of games, in numeric format, and this simply shows it in kind of graphical format, but the values match.